Welcome everyone to this edition of the KIX Conversations. I am Ivana Zacarias, researcher of the KIX Lab project, and it is a pleasure to share this space with all of you to exchange experiences and discuss topics related to education in Latin America and the Caribbean. We thank each person who is watching this content through our YouTube channel and the KIX Lab Facebook page. We invite you to follow our fan page and subscribe to our channel and share this content. Before I start, I would like to tell you a little bit about what KIX is. KIX is the Knowledge, Innovation and Exchange Initiative promoted by the Global Partnership for Education and the International Development Research Center. To achieve its objective, KIX relies on regional hubs worldwide where educational leaders share information, knowledge, innovation, and experiences. Among these hubs, SUMA, together with the Organization for Eastern Caribbean States, leads the Latin America and Caribbean Hub. The hub comprises 10 countries: Dominica, Grenada, Guyana, Haiti, Honduras, Nicaragua, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Guatemala, and El Salvador. On this occasion, it is a pleasure for me to introduce Ms. Judy Ann Auld. Welcome, Ms. Judy Ann. Thank you for accepting our invitation and sharing your experience.
Thank you so much, Ivana, for inviting me. I am honored to be given this opportunity.
I would like to start by introducing a short bio of our guest. Judy Ann Allison Auld is rights researcher at the Faculty of Education of the University of West Indies at Cape Hill. She has been the principal of a special education institution on her island, Grenada. She began her teaching career at the age of 16. 5 years later, she graduated with a certificate in primary education from the University of West Indies and was also awarded a certificate for outstanding performance in teacher education. She received her Bachelor's of Arts in Educational Leadership and Management with honors from the University of West Indies and her Master's in Inclusive Special Education from the University of Roehampton in London. She's presently pursuing a doctoral degree in education with concentration in special and inclusive education. Ms. Auld is a cultural enthusiast, pageant coach, and judge. She also enjoys sewing and designing as well as cake decorating. She is a devout Christian and president of the women's group at her church. Ms. Auld has one teenage daughter and is also an emergency foster parent with the Child Protection Authority of Grenada. So thank you, Julianne. And as you are an expert in inclusive education, and I would like to ask you a little bit about the topics that you are doing research on. My first question is, on the basis of your research, what are the main challenges the region faces in terms of inclusion and special education?
Thank you so much again, Ivana. Well, I'm going to focus on a report from the 2020 Global Educational Monitoring, that's GEM, and the findings from the 2020 Global Education Monitoring Report for Latin America and the Caribbean have highlighted some of the challenges that the Caribbean region face in the implementation of inclusive education. Now, the first of those are weak implementation of laws and policies. According to that report, only 4 countries in the Caribbean so far have ratified all of the 8 international conventions regarding the rights to non-discrimination in education. The report also stated that 82% of countries in the Caribbean have gone ahead and regulated education provisions for persons with disabilities in the Education Acts and laws. However, a study conducted by Blackman, Conrad, and Brown in the Caribbean in 2012 have found that despite the existence of policies for inclusion in some of our Caribbean islands, the implementation is proving to be quite problematic. UNESCO has also agreed. They have identified the need to address the challenges of implementing inclusive education in the Caribbean. Some of the other challenges are inadequate resources, lack of insufficient identification of needs, inadequate teacher training, inaccessible infrastructure, and lack of assistive technology. So, in my position as an administrator in special ed and now doing my PhD, I have decided to focus on the implementation of inclusive education in the Caribbean to see how best we can analyze some of these challenges and come up with some means of addressing them. Thank you.
Thank you, Julian. And yes, so you are doing research on these topics, and you have shared some of the challenges that the region is facing in terms of enactment, infrastructure, teacher training. Can you share a little bit how these challenges can be addressed? What have you learned? Can we learn anything from other contexts?
Yes, Ivana, there are researchers, especially in Trinidad and Tobago, who have done some work in that area. And there is no doubt that school culture shapes the practices necessary to achieve inclusion. The research is showing that if traditional school structures and cultures are maintained, any reform efforts to achieve inclusion will fail. The development of inclusive schools must involve changes in what occurs in the classroom, the staff rooms, the playground, and in relationships with parents and caregivers. As well as we cannot forget that the support service providers, there must be collaborative efforts among all. Additionally, there is an urgent need for ministries of education to train and mentor staff and also to provide resources needed for schools to effectively implement inclusive approaches for diverse learners. Most ministries of education are not able to fulfill the promises promoted by the policies of inclusive education, as these programs are often treated generally as add on programs to be handled by a small number of people at the school level. Many research have also found and explained the disadvantage of leaving policy implementation in the hands of one or two people in a school community. I have to agree that policy implementation should not be left up to educators only. In countries where resources are scarce, like ours in the Caribbean, a multidisciplinary team approach may prove effective here. Individuals outside of the school can influence policy implementation. For example, key actors can be identified at the school level, at the community level, and at various levels of government. All stakeholders must be engaged, and formal roles must be assigned to individuals based on their views, interests, capacity, motivation, and skills. Because what I'm finding in discussion with persons, they are not really clear on their roles in the implementation process. So the policy actors should be tasked with implementation, and they must have clear understanding of the policy and knowledge of what they are expected to do. It is a documented fact that where a policy is poorly communicated, implementers are forced to use the discretion, which in turn may compromise the purpose of the policy, as we are seeing happening now.
Okay, thank you. So we have examples also in the sub-region of the Caribbean to learn from, which
Yes.
is very encouraging because it seems that it's not so far away that we can take some lessons. And I guess that well, this is a short conversation, but there is much to learn from as well if we had more time.
Sure.
Unfortunately, I have to go to the next question. And uh, we would like to ask you in this new context that we have seen the expansion of technology in the context of the pandemic because of the COVID pandemic. We have seen this expansion of technology. So I would like to ask you how do you see that new opportunities can emerge for promoting a more inclusive environment? Do you think that technology can bring new opportunities or room for improvement and room for expansion of rights? Or maybe it might widen the gaps that already exist.
Ivana, I'm happy that you asked that question because the use of technology in special education is becoming a prominent feature in lots of our educational journals. Florian and Hagati, for example, in 2014, they have labeled ICT as a tool for inclusion. These authors suggest that technology is a great equalizer that can serve as a cognitive prosthesis to overcome or compensate for differences among our learners. There are several programs and apps that teachers can use to quickly modify instructions and accommodate a diverse range of learners in their classrooms. The pandemic has pushed countries to invest heavily in technology to meet the needs of learners outside of the classroom. So I think this is the opportune time for us to try to equalize that playing field for our learners with special needs by introducing technology. These have provided a great opportunity to create the conditions for and to provide equal opportunities for learning and access to education and to the curriculum for all learners.
Well, thank you. It sounds that we have opportunities, that there is that not everything is a challenge as we might think. Of course, I guess that as you said before, a lot of actors need to be taught, need to be trained for the use of uh, technology for differentiated instruction, for teaching to each of the students how in the way that each of the students learn.
Great. And we have had the experience, even if it was forced on us during the
Uh-huh.
pandemic. So I think this is the opportune time now for us to evaluate. And it's a good area for research to see how, especially teachers in inclusive settings would have used technology, what are the challenges they would have faced, and what are some opportunities that are available there for us.
So do you think that there are no good evaluations so far of how technology has worked?
I'm saying it's an opportune time now for us to
Okay.
evaluate because teachers have had the opportunity to use it over the last 2 years. So I'm seeing it as a great research area for research presently.
I can imagine. Yes, I think that the pandemic will give us a lot of spaces for research in many areas, and probably inclusive education, special education is one of the areas where we have more depths,
Sure,
and we need to to take the opportunity to do better and more research on this area.
I agree.
I would like to ask you now to move to your experience as not as researcher, Julian. As I said before, you also were principal of a special needs school. And in that role, I will ask you to ask two questions. First, what do you think are the key competencies and skills that a leader needs to have to be effective in an inclusive environment? And second, how do you envision the future of special education institutions in the Caribbean, considering that in other countries in the region, especially in Latin America, not particularly in the Caribbean, but maybe more in Latin America, you have a trend for integrating special education schools into um, uh,
Mainstream.
mainstream this school. Yes.
Okay,
So
good.
how do you see the future of special needs education in that context?
Well, let me take the first part of the question first.
Yes.
The principal role is very critical because principals of special schools are responsible for a very vulnerable population. Therefore, they must be able to address and eliminate marginalization and discrimination. Most often, we find that special schools are left out of many activities organized for students in the mainstream settings. And as a principal of a special school, you must be able to advocate for your students. This may mean that you would have to challenge some of the institutionalized structures and the policies within the education system because these structures definitely marginalized our students with special needs. Principals of special schools must challenge the status quo of traditionally competitive and individualistic approaches to teaching. They must ensure that their schools are efficiently resourced because, as I said before, most often in planning and budgeting, the special schools are generally not recognized or forgotten. And that's, I'm speaking from my experience. Also, in terms of staff training, there are training opportunities that are offered in other areas of education, but very little are being offered in special education. So, principals have to lobby to ensure that the staff are effectively trained in all areas. They should lead by example as well and encourage cooperation and teamwork. This is not a journey that can be traveled alone. And they must take risk and encourage their staff members to persist because it's daunting sometimes. They must remain current and they must keep striving to improve their practices if they are to provide the best possible educational opportunities for their students.
Thank you, Julian. Yes, you let me thinking a lot because, uh, as you said, it might be hard work for you, and I have I have to say this personally. I have known you for some time now, and it makes me admire you more, uh, because it seems that the job that you have had, it's really demanding and quite impressive because you don't know you not only need to work with your own frustrations, but as you said, you have to be encouraging for your staff to deal with frustrations of uh, not only of the challenges they face, but also of a systems that is not prepared uh, for the needs that they have, that you have as a leader there. So it's quite impressive what you have done. I don't know the size of the school that you have led. How many students did you used to have?
What our largest population would have been 59. But now, because most students are being integrated into the mainstream, the numbers are down to 48 total.
And their ages?
Range from 6 years old to 18 years old.
Yes, quite a range of ages and
Yes.
different needs, different
Very.
desires. And I guess that you have also to uh, be patient and integrate their families as well. So I
Sure.
cannot imagine the size of the challenge that you used to have. And do you expect, after you finish your doctoral degree, do you expect to return to that position?
I am kind of hoping I can, as well as I'm hoping I can extend myself to other areas. So, when I say other areas within special and inclusive education, so not really particularly within the Victoria School for Special Education context, but I will be able to share my experiences to other programs geared at special and inclusive education that is being implemented by the Ministry of Education.
Well, it's clear that we need more professionals in special ed education and trained leaders as you with master's degree, with doctoral degree, specializing, getting to know more. So, Julia, for me, it has been a pleasure to do this interview, and it is a pleasure for me to work with you daily on a daily basis. Uh, it's, as I said before, it's really admiring the task that you have been doing. And I would like to thank all our audience that has been listening to this KIX conversation, and we hope to meet soon again. We also thank the organizing team that made it possible, GPE, IDRC, OECS, and of course all the team of SUMA involved in this important initiative that is discussing and thinking the educational challenges in the region and giving voice to leaders such as Judy Ann, who are doing great jobs, great activities, contributing in the field, in the region, to improve the educational opportunities of the most vulnerable populations. We invite you to follow us on our social networks at KIXLAC to be informed of upcoming events, news, and activities that we will carry out during this year. And thanks again to all of you, and see you next time.
Thank you, Ivana. It was my pleasure.
My pleasure.